Hello, and welcome to The People's Perspective with Senator Nia Gill. I'm Nia Gill, your state senator from the 34th Legislative District, which encompasses the vibrant communities of Montclair, East Orange, Glen Ridge, Clifton, and Woodland Park. For centuries, people have sewn together pieces of fabric to create quilts for everyday use as an art form. My guest on today's program is quilter and artist Glendora Simonson, a member of the Nubian Heritage Quilters Gill. On today's show, we will explore the history of African, African American, and American quilting. And Glendora will discuss the exquisite quilt that she brought with her today. Welcome, Glendora.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
And can you please tell us a little about the history of quilting in the Nubian quilters, as well as yourself?
Okay, terrific. Quilting, of course, goes back a long time. Many of our grandmothers, great-grandmothers, etc., were expected to sew. And until the very recent generation, do you have women growing up who may be not so proficient in that skill? My mother was no exception, neither was her mother. So I learned to sew early, and then I also had an artistic outlook and liked to draw, etc. And I kind of discovered quilting as a way to marry the two. In terms of quilting, and this piece in particular, I was teaching a class at the Newark Museum, which I've gone to for years. I grew up in Newark, and I took art classes at the Newark Museum. So I was teaching a class there, and some other women in the class decided we'd like to keep getting together to talk about the history of quilting, to promote the African American experience in quilting, and to fellowship. And so 15 years ago, the Nubian Heritage Quilters was founded with myself and Carolyn Davis. And so we've been meeting ever since then. We had our anniversary at the Montclair Historical Society. We're primarily based in Essex County, but we have members from all over the state of New Jersey, some members in New York. We have some long distance members who've moved away but still relate to us. And I think the member who lives the furthest away is in California.
Oh, well, now
so
that covers everything.
Absolutely, California and Georgia, etc.
What is quilting?
Quilting is a way of layering fabric, a filling, and a backing fabric together. And it's really stitched together. So that's the quilting piece of it. It's a sewing technique. Its primary focus was to make utilitarian quilts to keep you warm. And that's part of it. You also have patchwork, which is another way of designing the quilt top. Several of the items on this quilt are patchwork, small pieces sewn together. And of course, it's also fun. It's a folk art. It's a way of expressing creativity. And it's a way, I think, of connecting us to our past.
So it's a mechanism for remembrance and also enlightenment?
Absolutely.
And how is that done?
Well, part of what we want to do with the Nubian Heritage Quilters is to celebrate this activity that our foremothers have engaged in for a long time, to honor it, to remember it, to respect it. And so we are really very enthusiastic about promoting what they did. And although the resources might have been meager, the works of art are beautiful, and that they deserve recognition and preservation. And we want to make sure we teach younger people about what we did.
Well, are there particular kinds of either stitches or arrangements that carry with it a historical past and understanding? Can we talk a little about that?
Sure. The basic stitch in quilting and in patchwork is called the running stitch. Very simple stitch, nothing complicated.
Sound like my life, the running life.
Yeah, running life for sure. In and out, in and out. It's a very basic stitch. You use it for patchwork if you're doing traditional piecing, as well as quilting through the layers of fabric. Historically, some of the slaves that were brought here had skills in the textile area. They were able to, the people selling them were then able to command higher prices because that was a skill that was necessary. One of the things that I enjoy dispelling is that all the things that helped a plantation or a loom house to run was not taught to the slaves by the missus on the plantation. That there were skills the other slaves were responsible for teaching the other slaves how
Are
to
there
do
any
this activity.
particular patterns that are traced to Africa by way of the
Well, there are a
Middle
couple that
Passage?
come to mind. One is the log cabin pattern, very traditional, used in colonial America as well as in Europe. It turns out that the pattern itself goes back a very long time and has been found on mummy wrappings in Egypt. Now, America is pretty old, 200 years. We think it's old. But the wrappings on the Egyptian mummies is far older than 200. So although a lot of very traditional quilters like to think of this as a uniquely American design, obviously it's not.
And the log cabin
The log cabin.
has been touted as a uniquely American by African Americans, American
Absolutely.
quilters.
Absolutely. The traditional block has a red or a yellow center, and with a twist, the log cabin blocks that have a black center have been told that represent and were used to identify safe houses along the Underground Railroad.
And we'd like to talk about how quilts were used in the Underground Railroad as direction and warning for those people who were looking for and moving towards freedom.
Absolutely.
And can we talk a little about that?
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned, if the log cabin block, the particular quilt block, had a black center, the folklore says it was used to identify a safe house.
And we will come back in
Okay.
a moment
All right.
to see how do you get to the safe house and what it meant.
Very good.
Thank you very much.